Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. I thought my grandma's rules were fake. Then I broke one. My first memory is of a dead man. I'm 4. Rolls of morning fog swirl around me. I look up and there he is, strung by a dozen silver ropes between pine trees like a caught fly, dripping with blood. His expression is one of shock and horror, but mainly of death. Years later, when the memory surfaces without any reason, I ask my grandmother about it. Sometimes the forest gives, she says with a shrug, and sometimes it eats. At the time I think she means how we often conjure up terrible fantasies deep in the woods, that my memory is really a misremembering. I now know that isn't what she meant at all. I live in a cabin in the heart of the forest. The deep woods. That's what Gran has always called it, at least. I'm old enough now that I suspect there's another name for the place we live, but she's never offered it up. At this point, I don't care much. It's always been just the two of us, as far back as I can remember. No cousins or friends that come for a visit. Not my parents or even the memory of them. I might have thought Gran kidnapped me as a baby and is hiding me in the middle of nowhere, if it weren't for our shared crooked noses, skewed at exactly the same angles, and the way we both sneeze in the strong sunlight. And besides, if I were some kidnapped child, escaping wouldn't be an issue. I'm in town twice a week for classes with the other local children, usually just Hollis and Jackson, but Nara too when her father lets her. We have a computer with internet in our reading nook, and I'm given free rein to roam the deep woods whenever I please. As long as I follow the superstitions, that's what I call them at least. Stomp at each end of a bridge 3 times whenever you cross one. Leave milk on the front porch every summer and winter solstice. Crush soon berries before they can ripen to purple. Never leave a photograph in view of an open window. Always lock the door before sunset but unlock it before sunrise. To her, these rituals are rules. Unchangeable forces of nature like velocity or gravity, a way of life. To me, though, a rule has always been a thing with a consequence behind it. There has to be a point. When I was young, I didn't know the difference, but isn't it the same for any child? Rain is just as normal and natural to us before we learn about the water cycle as it is after. Things simply are. It's only when we can finally reach the top shelf that we start to question. Slowly, as I grew, the two categories began to separate, rules and superstitions. Keep away from the burning oven rule. Walk a circle around the cabin 10 times before bed every night superstition. Even now, some things are more difficult to categorize. Don't get me wrong. Gran is wonderful. She feeds me, and sings me to sleep, and teaches me to tell a thistle sprig from a viper nettle. I never could have asked for a better caretaker. At the same time, there are things about my childhood I still don't understand. Never be caught in the hail, she told me once. I have distinct, vivid memories, sitting on her lap, watching granules hit the pine needles outside our home. After the hail turned to rain, we would both hurry outside to collect the frozen chunks by the handful. What Gran did with the hail we collected, I never figured out. What use could somebody have for bits of dirty ice? We would tie loose bits of thread around the trees by our house. Whenever my clothing grew too bare or my sleeves ripped, Gran would spend hours carefully unspooling the entire outfit. Then we would take the basket of threads to the pine trees, dig shallow holes, and wrap the threads around the base. It became a game. Yarning I would call it. I would run in circles around the pine trees, until I grew dizzy and fell to the dirt in a giggling heap. When I was done, we would fill in our holes to bury the threads. Trees are fickle creatures, Gran would tell me. They need a shorter leash than most or they forget who they're loyal to. Us? No, she offered an odd smile. Not us. Why did we do that? What was the point? There are other odder things, things I can't quite brush off to superstition. Like the hiker in red. His arrival is like a holiday, not in the sense of celebrations and fireworks, in the way something reoccurs every year. Every September 28th, we know to expect the hiker. He stumbles to our doorway, bedraggled and soaked in sweat, red shorts and red t-shirt. Please, he always say. I'm lost. Come in. Gran waves him in, gives him food and water, and listens to his story. He'd gone on a solo backpacking trip to the Sierras but lost the trail. He was out of food, out of strength, and he'd been wandering for well, he couldn't remember how long now. Days? A week? Where is he now? This is the deep woods, and town is that way. Gran will point him towards the village. Eventually, he wanders off in that direction, seemingly to go find more help, but every year, he's back. What do you do? I finally asked him one year. Gran was out back fetching water where she couldn't hear us. She didn't like me prying too much into the hiker in red. Pardon? In the time you aren't here. What do you do all year in the forest before you come back? I don't. I'm not, his head jerked then. His eyes blinked rapidly, like a computer stuttering to restart. When he refocused on me, there was a new look in his eyes, something besides the scared desperation that was there year after year, a hunger. Here you are, Gran said, coming back in with a jug of water. He blinked and the look was gone. Perhaps it was my imagination. Perhaps the man had merely been annoyed, but in that brief second. There's lots of these things. Superstitions without reason or oddities without explanation. It's the way it's been for years, my entire life. Gran and me, the two of us, alone in our cottage in the heart of the deep wood. Until a week ago. I found a new void tree, I told Gran. She looked up from her dream catcher, needle in one hand, thread in the other. A stack of completed ones sat on the porch table next to her rocking chair. A void tree? She asked. It's been years since I've spotted one. Just past the stream, inside that thicket of elms. I never thought to look inside, but it was right there, in the center of them all. An odd excitement lit her face. She hurried to her room to grab a spile and a bucket. Void trees. I've looked them up online before. I've asked Hollis and the other kids about them too. Far as I can tell, though, there's no such thing as a void tree outside of the deep woods. They're tall with shockingly red bark and shockingly black leaves. I've never much cared for them, there's something unnameably disconcerting about them, but Gran hunts for them whenever we go out walking, usually to little success. Why don't you grow your own? I've asked her before. She only shook her head. Void trees don't work like that. I led her to the thicket of elms, and then through the gap between branches to the center. Sure enough, a void tree leered down at us. Gran wasted no time. She used a drill to make a hole in the trunk and a hammer to pound the spile into that hole. She hung a bucket from it. Well done, she told me. The eyes of youth are worth 100 eyes like mine. There's another oddity. Void tree sap. Gran collects it by the bucketful from a dozen different locations. As far back as I can remember, she harvests it throughout the year, then bottles it in jugs, and stores it in our basement. Every once in a while, a jug will go missing. Whenever I've asked where the sap goes, she only pinches her lips. Once, I dipped my finger in one of the buckets and licked the sticky residue in front of her. It was bitter, not sweet like maple. She shook her head, made me wash off my hand, then lectured me for half an hour. It's too valuable to be eaten, she repeated. This new void tree was Christmas come early to her. She checked it every day that week, sometimes twice a day. In the evenings she would lug buckets of sap back to our home to boil and can. Some days, I helped. Mostly, she seemed happy enough to do it herself, so I let her. And then on day 5, yesterday, she didn't show up. It wasn't like her. Gran was always home by sunset for our nightly ritual of circling the cabin. 10 times every night before bed, that was the superstition. She was always back by now. I checked the usual places. The stream where we would catch crawdads. The valley overlook she liked to walk to. I was about to make the trek to town to see if she'd gotten caught up at the general store, when I thought of the void tree. She was unconscious when I found her. Dried blood crusted her forehead, and a thick, broken branch lay in the dirt beside her. It wasn't difficult to tell what had happened. Gran! Gran, wake up! I tried to rouse her, but she was unresponsive. I tried lifting her, but I've never been an especially strong girl. Eventually, even though I hated it, I left. I sprinted the entire way to town, and screamed for Dr. McKenty. After another hour, well after dark had fallen, they finally managed to get Gran to the mini building that the town refers to as the hospital. She was already coming to by the time Dr. McKenty stuck her with an IV, but she was still groggy and confused. I sat with her until she finally seemed to recognize me. "Juniper," she said. "Hi Gran. How are you feeling?" She smiled and reached for my hand. "My head. It aches. I remember going to check on the sap. A branch fell. It hit you, but they say you'll be all right." Her eyes went wide. "The cabin," she said. "Did we circle it already? I can't remember." For once, could she just give up these rituals? There was no time. "You got hurt, we had to bring you here. Is it dark already?" She looked wildly for a window. When her eyes latched onto one, her expression went terrified. I'd never seen her look like that. "You have to go now, Juniper. Walk around the cabin 10 times and lock the door. You might still have time. Gran, I'm not going to leave you. Nothing bad is going to happen. The deep wood is our home." "The deep wood isn't our home," she said. "It's nothing but a stomach." She dug her nails into the back of my hand. Still, she wore that terrible, terrible expression, like something was irreparably wrong. "Go," she hissed. "Please." I did. It was better for her rest if I left. That was my rationale. She didn't seem able to calm down with me there. I know to many the forest is a terrifying place at night, but for me, it's the same as wandering down to your kitchen for a snack at midnight. Slightly creepy, yes. Not terrifying though. The deep woods are my home. The trails are familiar. When I got to our cabin in the dark, I considered just going in, locking the door, and going to sleep. It had been a long couple of hours. Gran would question me in the morning. That much I was sure of. She'd ask me if I'd done the ritual, and I would have to lie to her. That's never been something I'm especially good at, nor have I cared to be. Fine then. I would do it. 1, 2, 3. For times I walked around the cabin. I could have done it with my eyes closed after so many years of the ritual. Every bucket, bench, and bush around the cabin was known to me, the same places as always. 5. There was a snap from the darkness of the trees. Nothing unusual. 6. I paused. That sound. It was nothing. A raccoon perhaps. 7. Something was off. There was a noise, almost like breathing but heavier than any animal I knew of. I could feel it now. Whenever I passed by the front door, something was watching me from the foliage. "Hello." I called out. Nothing. 8. I hurried faster. My walk turned into a run, but still I didn't risk turning on a flashlight. That would only let the thing see me as much as it would let me see it, and I knew our yard better than anyone else. Sticks cracked and leaves crunches as if the thing was approaching. 9. Only one more, I told myself. You're almost there. I had less than a rotation and I could throw myself inside, lock the door, be safe. The steady crunches turned to a pounding. The thing was sprinting for me. I flung open the cabin door, hurled myself inside, and slammed the door behind me. The 10th time. I hadn't finished. Thump. Something crashed into the wood. It scratched and scrabbled at walls. I reached up and twisted the bolt, heart pounding, breath heavy. The back door. Had I locked it earlier? For precious seconds I couldn't move. What was happening? What was trying to get inside? But then the pounding stopped, and audible footsteps skittered around the side of our house. I sprung up, threw myself at the back door, and slammed it locked just as the thing reached it. More scratching. More pounding. I'm sorry, I whispered even though Gran couldn't hear me. I should have believed you. The frantic noises grew louder. The thing wanted in. It wanted me. The wood creaked. The hinges shuddered. The door was going to give in, and this creature was going to crack. Silence. After the single echoing snap, the noises stopped. The thing went totally quiet. I waited for another half an hour, back against the door, knowing it would come back, but it never did. Eventually, I drifted off. In the morning, my eyes flitted open just before dawn. I would have stayed there in our cabin, eating our food storage until it ran out, if it meant I didn't have to ever go outside again. In the end though, it was Gran's other superstition rules now, that made me do it. Lock the door before sunset and unlock it before sunrise. I wouldn't risk disobeying one of them again. From the front of the house, the deep wood seemed normal as always. Birds chirped overhead. But then I traveled to the back, the side the thing had been on when it went quiet. His expression was one of shock and horror. But mainly of death. The hiker in red was slung up between 4 or 5 trees, held up by dozens of assorted threads and bits of yarn. They didn't wrap around him like one might expect. They shot through him at every angle. One purple thread passed directly through his forehead, a single bead of blood had dried there. I could remember it. That snap of something being yanked backwards all at once. More than that, I recognized the threads. They were the ones Gran and I had looped around the pine trees for years, the remnants of my own retired clothing. The longer I looked, there was something else frozen in the hiker's expression besides surprise, something that wasn't obvious at first, that hunger from long ago. An aching, senseless need to consume. For a long while I just stared up into his face. Then I grabbed a bucket and headed for the void tree. I live in a cabin in the forest. I used to say the heart of the forest, but I know that isn't true now. There are lots of things my grandmother never explained to me, but once she's back from the hospital, I intend to question her about them, all of them. When she does, I'll keep you posted. I'll ask about her rituals and rules, but the first thing I plan to ask her is this. The deep wood is a stomach. So what is its food? Story 2. I walked in on my boyfriend. His face was unplugged. It was just outlets. Instead of high cheekbones, brown eyes, and a cute puckered mouth, there was a completely flat metallic surface full of holes. My boyfriend's face looked like a wall fixture, or maybe the back of a TV. I screamed, and staggered against the bathroom's towel rack. Oh Beth! God! My boyfriend's voice came through a tiny speaker on his outlet face. He grabbed a fleshy oval he was drying in the sink and pressed it against his head. I could hear a snap and click as he thumbed his cheeks. Within seconds, his face was attached like normal. Or at least, as normal as it could appear after such a horrific reveal. So sorry you had to see me like that. I turned and fled. Out of instinct more than anything, I ran to our kitchen and grabbed a knife. The cold handle stayed glued to my palm. Beth, calm down, please. My boyfriend emerged with outstretched, cautious hands. No need to overreact. He stayed away from the glint of my knife. Where's Tim? I said, looking right into my boyfriend's eyes. What did you do with Tim? Beth, relax. I am Tim. I've always had this. He gestured behind his jawbones. I could see little divots where his face had just connected, little divots I had always thought were just some old acne scars. I'm really sorry. I should have told you sooner. I should have told you as soon as I found out. What the fuck was he talking about? Found out what? That I'm not, technically, you know. That I'm not fully organic. The words froze me in place. Out of all the possible phrases he could have uttered, I really did not like the sound of not fully organic. He nodded wordlessly several times. I know it's awkward. I should have told you sooner. But as you might guess, it's not exactly the easiest thing to share. I stared for a long moment at this hunched over, wincing, apologetic person who claimed to be my boyfriend. I pointed at him with the knife. Explain. I will, but first, why don't we put the blade away? Let's calm ourselves. Let's sit down. You sit down. Although visibly a little frightened of my knife, he looked and behaved as Tim always did. His eyes still had the same shine, his lips still curled and puckered in that typical Tim way. If I hadn't seen him faceless a moment ago, I wouldn't have doubted his earnestness for a second. But I had seen him faceless. And now a primal, guttural impulse told me I couldn't trust him. He has a plug face. He has a plug face. I'll go sit down. Tim raised his arms cooperatively. He grabbed one of our fold-out chairs and seated himself on the far end of our living room. Here. I'll sit here and give you lots of space. I unlocked the door to our apartment and stood by the front entrance. My hand still clutched the small paring knife in his direction. It's a very warranted reaction, Tim said. I get it. Truly I do. But it doesn't have to be this uncomfortable, Beth. I'm not a monster. I promise I'm still the same me. I'm not going to hurt you. I aimed the stainless steel at him without quivering. Just, explain. He gave a big long inhale, followed by an even longer sigh, as if doing so could somehow deflate the intensity of the situation. Okay. I'll try my best to explain. It's a whole lot I've uncovered over the last while and I don't really know where to begin, but I'll start with the basics. First of all, we aren't real. I scoffed. I couldn't help myself. Well, I don't fully know about you yet, I suspect you're artificial as well, but definitely me. I have fully confirmed that I'm a fake. Goosebumps ran down my neck. With my free hand I touched the area behind my jawline. I couldn't feel any indents. I've never had any indents there. A fake? I asked. A fake. A null. I'm not a real living person. I've been programmed with just enough memories to make it feel like I'm a carpenter in my early 30s, but really, I'm just background filler. Some sort of synthetic bioroid. Every word he said coiled a wire in my stomach. There's a couple others I discovered online. Tim pulled out his phone. Fakes, I mean. Their situations are similar to ours. It's always a young couple sharing a brand new apartment. One they can't possibly afford. He let the word hang. What do you mean? I said. We can afford our apartment. Beth. I've never worked a day in my life. What are you talking about? Tim steepled his hands, and brought them over his face. I've set GoPros in my clothing. I've recorded where I've gone. After I put on my overalls and wave you goodbye, I take the elevator to our garage. But instead of going to P1 where our car is parked, I actually go down to P4, and lock myself up, inside a locker. What? Something overrides my consciousness, and I sleep standing for hours. I'm talking like a full 8-hour workday, plus some buffer for any fictional traffic. Then my memory is wiped. What? My memory is wiped and replaced with a false memory of having worked in some construction yard with my crew. And then that's what I relay to you when I return home. That's all I remember. It's as simple as that. The goosebumps on my neck wouldn't relent. That can't be real. Can't be real. He stood up from his chair, and pointed at the sides of his head. My whole face comes off, Beth. I squeezed my eyes closed and bit my tongue. I bit harder and harder, praying it could wake me up out of this impossibility. But there was nothing to wake up from. Do you want me to show you again? Tim asked. No, I said. Please don't. I don't want to see it. Of course you don't. It's disturbing. I know. I'm a clockwork non-human who's been given the illusion of life. It's fucked. When I opened my eyes again, Tim was sitting again with his head in his palms, clutching at tufts of his hair. And do you know why they built us? Do you know why we exist? His voice turned shrill. I swallowed a warm wad of copper, and realized my teeth had punctured my tongue. I unclenched my jaw. It's for decor. We exist to drive up the value of the condominiums in the building. We exist to make something look popular, normal, and safe. We're background Bayreuth actors in a living advertisement. I finally loosened my grip, and set the knife by the front entrance. I grabbed my jacket. I don't know what you are, but I'm not decor. I'm normal. I said. My face doesn't come off. Tim lifted his head from his hands and looked at me cynically. Beth. Have you ever filmed yourself leaving the house? I leave the house all the time. I know it feels that way. But have you ever actually filmed yourself? We both went on a walk this morning. Tim nodded. And that is the only time. The only time we actually leave is when we walk through the neighborhood, and do you know why? I gave a small shake of the head. I put on my scarf. To endorse the ambience of this gentrified hellhole. We're animated mannequins looping on false memories and false lives. We're part of a glorified screensaver. That's not true. I opened the door and got ready to leave. I walk for my knee. I take walks close by because my physiotherapist said it was good for my knee. I don't walk because I'm decor. You can justify it however you want, Beth. Tim crossed over from his chair. But chances are that every physio appointment, every evening out with friends, every memory of the mall is just an implant in your head. You're wrong. And my face does not come off. Tim stood with arms at his sides. He smiled a little. It's like he was glad that I was so stubborn. Are you sure about that? Yes. I prodded behind my cheeks, looking for any ridges. You can reach behind your jaw all you want, Tim said. But that doesn't mean anything. You could be a totally different model than me. Different model? Let me check behind your head. What? Some fakes have better seams. But there's always a particular indent at the back of the head. He came over in slow, steady advances. Stop. I grabbed the knife again. You're not coming any closer. He paused. Held up his hands. I could show you with a mirror, or take a picture with my phone to be sure. I don't trust you, Tim. Or whatever you are. His face saddened. I swear, Beth, as weird as it sounds, I'm telling the truth. I wish it were different. You have to believe me. I didn't believe him. Or maybe I didn't want to believe him. Or maybe after seeing a person detach their own face, I just couldn't have faith in anything they ever said ever again. I'm going to leave, Tim. I'm staying somewhere else tonight. He shook his head. A hotel won't do anything. They want you to stay at a hotel. You'll make their hotel look good. I'm not telling you where I'm staying. He laughed in an exasperated, incredulous laugh. Seriously, Beth, have you ever really looked at yourself in the mirror? We are the perfect, most banal-looking couple ever to grace this yuppified enclave. We're goddamn robots owned by a straight-A corporation to maintain the vibe. Think about it. What do you do at home all day? I didn't want to think about it. I walked out the door holding the knife, watching Tim the whole time, daring him to follow me. He didn't. I left down the emergency staircase. It was an ugly breakup. I didn't want to see him when I gathered my things, so I only collected my stuff during his work hours. He kept texting me more pictures of the seams along his face. He kept explaining how all of our friends were perpetually on vacation, which is why our whole social life exists only via screens, because it's all an elaborate orchestration to make us think we're real people when we're really just robots designed to walk around and look nice. I called him crazy. I convinced myself that the plug-face encounter in the bathroom was a hallucination. His conspiratorial texts and calls had gotten to me and made me misremember things. That's all it was. The whole plug-face episode was a fabrication. He was just going crazy, and trying to drag me down with him, but I was not going along for the ride. After many heated exchanges, I eventually told him as politely as I could to fuck off. I blocked him across all of my messaging apps. 5 months later he got a new phone number. He sent one last flurry of texts. Apparently the straight-A corporation was going to decommission his existence. They were finally going to sell our old flat to an actual human couple. My simulation has served its purpose. Soon I'm going to be stored away in that P4 locker indefinitely. I messaged back saying, dude, knock this shit off and move on with your life. You're not a robot. Let go of this delusion. Seek help. I texted him a list of mental health resources available online, and blocked him yet again. Just because he was having trouble controlling his mania, didn't mean he had the right to spill it onto me. These days I'm feeling much happier. I found a new man and reset myself in a completely different part of the city. We live in one of those brand new towers downtown. Our flat is super spacious, with quick routes to all nearby amenities. It's something I could have never been able to afford with Tim. Tyler is a plumber with his own business, who has his priorities straight. He's letting me take all the time I need to adjust to the neighborhood. I'm spending most of my days sending resumes at home, and chatting with Kira and Stacy, who are currently in Barcelona. When they get back, we're going to arrange an epic girls' night. Life's so much better here. So much more peaceful. Tyler holds my hand as we take our nightly walks around our place. My favorite part is when we cross beneath the long waterfall by the front entrance. Beneath the waterfall, the world appears like this shining, shimmering silhouette, waiting to reveal its magic. It's so beautiful. Story 3. 5 years ago I cloned my son. I just found out he was never mine. I parked down the block. Kept the engine running. Didn't touch the envelope on the seat beside me. It was already open, the paper inside curled and sweat warped from being folded and unfolded too many times. I'd memorized every word, every percentage, every damning absence of genetic overlap. I didn't need to read it again. But I would. Probably tonight. Probably every night from now on. I was shaking. From rage. From shame. From something darker. He was sitting in his booster seat, dozing quietly. She hadn't seen me in over a decade. Not since the funeral. Not since we buried Leo, our son, my son, in a plot shaded by cypress trees and long silences. He was 5. Slipped into a neighbor's pool while everyone was laughing around the grill. I'd never stopped seeing that day. I'd never stopped wishing I'd heard the splash that no one else noticed. The doctors had been fast. Too fast. Brain dead. No response. Time to let go. I tried everything. Begged. Hyperbaric therapy. Second opinions. I even called a neurologist in New Orleans who specialized in miracle cases. I held on with both hands. She let go. I was overruled. Grief hollowed me out. Left me brittle. Left me alone. I drifted into forums, Facebook groups, watched other grieving parents try to carry on like nothing had happened. I tried. I dated. I moved. I drank. But the world narrowed until all I had left was one impossible wish. That's when I found them. Or maybe they found me. A clinic in a country no one talks about. No address. No receipts. Just coordinates and a succession of meetings about funds. They called it selective genetic recultivation. Like they were growing tomatoes. They didn't need much, they said. A baby tooth. A lock of hair. A sliver of umbilical cord, still pressed between wax paper in an old scrapbook. I gave them everything. I wired the money. I signed the forms masked as adoption paperwork, sealed in obscure legalese and stamped with unfamiliar sigils. A year later, I was flat broke, but they gave me Leo again, my beautiful baby boy. Same eyes. Same laugh. Same habit of tugging my sleeve when he was about to doze off. It was perfect. I was overjoyed. I moved across the country. Changed my name. Started over. I told no one, not even her. It was selfish. It was monstrous. But it felt like salvation. I raised him and every day was a second chance I never took for granted. Until last week. Leo turned 5, again. The pediatrician ran a routine genetic panel, for medication allergies, she said. I let her do mine as well. And then came the call. Sir, there's been a mistake. The child you brought in, he isn't biologically related to you. At all. No match. No overlap. Nothing. Which meant Leo was still a clone. Just not mine. And there was only one other person in the world who could have given them the other half of his DNA. The woman I was about to face, for the first time in over a decade. She stared at the test results, her hands trembling. I feared this day, she whispered, and for a moment, I saw her, not the woman I'd hated, but the girl I married. Pale and frightened. Haunted. I thought. I hoped he was yours. But I didn't know for sure. It happened when you were away. My supervisor, he forced himself on me. I never told you because I didn't want it to be real. And then Leo died. Her voice broke. And I thought maybe that was the end of it. Of everything. Of that nightmare. My fists slowly unclenched. There was a long silence, the kind that stretches into the hollows of old grief. I'm sorry, she said. I am too, I managed. We stood there like statues, grief, guilt, and forgiveness carving us hollow. Then she glanced over my shoulder, to the street, to the car parked at the curb. Is that a kid in your car? She trailed off, a softness returning to her face. A gentle awe. I adopted, I lied smoothly. A small smile bloomed behind her tears. Does he make you happy? She said. I nodded. He's a good kid. We embraced, two parents wrecked and remade by loss, and I felt a strange kind of peace, like maybe this terrible wound could scab over. But then, she stepped outside. Just a few feet. Just far enough to glimpse the car again. And Leo. Leo had turned in his seat, somehow gotten up on his booster seat. Pressed one hand against the window. She saw him. Not a photo. Not a memory. Him. What was I thinking? Her expression collapsed in real time. Her mouth opened, no sound. She stumbled backward, eyes wide, hands to her chest. I turned. Got back in the car. Fastened the belt. She was already calling me. I let it ring. Then silenced it. She kept calling. I pulled away to her screaming my name. And his. She'd seen him. She knew. And she would never forget that face. But I had the paperwork. The passports. The clean aliases. Leo stirred in his seat, excited at how fast I was driving. I reached for his hand. Just a little further and we'll be home, buddy, I said. And we drove. Into the dusk. Into our second, stolen chance. Story 4. Whispers in the Lumber. I've hauled freight up and down the northern border for the better part of 12 years. It's quiet work, mostly. A lot of long nights, empty highways, and hours to think. Before this, I was in logistics for the army. Got deployed twice. Desert heat, endless paperwork, 1,000 moving parts to make sure convoys got from point A to point B without turning into headlines. After I mustered out, this felt like the natural fit. Hauling timber instead of tanks. Paper bills instead of orders. Still moving things. Still useful. I typically drove at night. Less traffic, fewer distractions. My route from Thunder Bay to Duluth had become second nature, winding through forested backroads and long stretches of blacktop so straight they felt like they'd split the earth in two. I'd stop for gas, keep the CB on low, sip strong coffee, and let the world slip by. Most nights were uneventful. That's what I liked about it. Predictable. Solitary. I've always been a skeptic by nature. Grew up practical. Never put much stock in ghost stories or campfire nonsense. Then came the job last October. I crossed the border late, around 11:30 p.m. It was drizzling, and the customs guy looked at me longer than normal. Young kid. Had to ask twice for my paperwork like his head was somewhere else. Got a lot of lumber in there, he said, peering past me into the darkness. Yeah, I replied. Same shipment type as last week. He nodded, but didn't move. You hear anything back there, you don't stop. You understand? I blinked. What? He shook his head, like shaking off a thought. Drive safe, sir. I chalked it up to a bad night. Maybe he'd seen some weird moose on the road or had a fight with his girlfriend. I drove off, tires humming on wet pavement. A couple hours into Minnesota, the road dipped into a thick stretch of forest. Pines rising like walls on both sides. The heater in my cab was on full blast, but I felt cold. Not a breeze through the window kind of cold, more like the kind that creeps inside your bones. That's when I heard the whispering. It was faint. Like someone mumbling just beneath the sound of the engine. I turned off the radio. Nothing. But the whispering didn't stop. I cracked the window, thinking maybe it was wind. Trees brushing against each other. Nothing out there but darkness. I shook my head. Just tired. I'd been pushing too hard. The road was hypnotic, and fatigue could play tricks. Then the CB crackled. Not static. Not a voice either. Something, in between. Like someone trying to talk through a throat full of gravel. Words half-formed and warped, broken and backward. I turned the volume down, then off. Still, the whispers continued. In my rearview mirror, something moved. Just for a second. A flicker. A silhouette darting past the trailer. But when I turned to look directly, nothing. Just the steady rhythm of my own headlights and the long black ribbon of the road. I pulled into a rest stop sometime past 2 a.m. Place was deserted. One broken vending machine buzzing near the bathroom and a flickering overhead light that made the shadows twitch. I stepped out, the cold slapping me awake. The trailer was quiet. I circled it slowly, boots crunching over gravel. That's when I saw the marks. Claw-like gouges along one side of the lumber stack. 4 deep scratches on a plank near the top, too high for any animal I know. The wood splintered outward, like something had been trying to get out. Or in. I didn't like the way my skin prickled. I chalked it up to vandalism. Maybe someone screwed with the load in Canada and I hadn't noticed. Maybe it was just old damage from a forklift. I climbed back into the cab, started her up, and glanced once more into the rear window. That's when I saw it. A pale hand, impossibly long, thin, almost skeletal, slithered back between the gaps in the lumber. Just for a split second. A blink. The hand pulled back and vanished into the darkness. I slammed the brakes. Jumped out with my flashlight. But when I searched the trailer, there was nothing. No movement. No signs. Just cold air and the faint smell of wet wood. I told myself it was a hallucination. Lack of sleep. Brain hiccups. But my hands didn't stop shaking. I considered stopping in the next town, but dispatch was on my ass about delivery times. Said I was already behind. No room in the schedule for ghost stories. So I kept driving. The road narrowed, coiling like a snake through the hills. No streetlights. No signs. The forest leaned close on both sides like it was listening. Then, the truck jerked hard to the right. The engine sputtered. Dashboard lights blinked like a dying Christmas tree. I swore and yanked the wheel, guiding the rig onto the shoulder as the whole thing rumbled to a stop. Silence swallowed me. I tried the ignition. Nothing. Dead. I popped the hood, climbed out. The engine looked fine. No leaks, no smoke. But something smelled wrong. Like old rot. Like something wet and alive had crawled into the machinery. Behind me, the trailer groaned. I turned. The tarp covering the lumber was moving. Not from wind. It rippled in rhythmic waves, like something underneath was breathing. Then it tore. Figures pulled themselves free from the lumber pile. Twisted things, all limbs and splinters, like dead trees warped into the shape of men. Their skin was bark and sinew, mottled with knots. Eyes glowed faint green, like swamp lights. Their mouths didn't open, but I heard them, deep inside my skull, whispering. I ran. I scrambled into the cab, slammed the door, locked it, shaking so hard I dropped my wrench. The creatures swarmed the truck. One climbed the hood, its hand cracking the windshield with a single strike. Another dragged claws along the side door, leaving deep gouges in the metal. I reached under the passenger seat. There, inside the old metal box I never thought I'd need, was my emergency satellite phone. I called for help. My voice was hoarse, barely coherent. I gave my location, screamed that I was under attack. The dispatcher's voice crackled, then the line went dead. A creature shattered the passenger window. I swung the wrench. The blow connected. It screamed, a sound that pierced straight through the marrow. The others paused, pulled back. I didn't wait. I kicked open the door and ran. Behind me, they tore into the truck. I heard metal scream, glass pop. Then the whole cab groaned and flipped onto its side with a sickening crunch. I hit the ditch hard. Everything spun. I don't remember much after that. When the highway patrol found me hours later, I was walking barefoot down the center of the road. Covered in blood and mud. I couldn't say my name. Couldn't say anything except, the things, in the wood. They said it was a freak accident, Said my truck died and the load shifted, caused the crash. Said I must have hit my head, hallucinated the rest. But I saw the lumber. Saw how it twisted. How some planks had warped into almost human shapes. Limbs. Faces. Eyes frozen mid-screen. The investigating officer didn't say anything. But he didn't look right either. Like he'd seen it too. They called it trauma. Told me to rest. Said I'd probably never drive again. And they were right. I never went back on the road. But I still hear the whispers. Sometimes, when the wind moves through the trees outside my window, I swear I can still see those eyes, glowing faint in the dark. Waiting. Listening. Story 5. I got lost in a movie theater bathroom. It was just a regular weekend day. In the evening, I went to the movies with my girlfriend to watch a film. Some lame horror, but it was the last thing playing, so we went. We were the only 2 people in the theater for the entire screening. When we got out, I really had to use the bathroom, too much soda during the movie. My girlfriend said she didn't need to go and would wait for me outside, right by the restroom entrance. The restroom was pretty standard, urinals and stalls. I've never liked using urinals, so I went into one of the stalls to relieve myself. Only a moment passed before someone else came in. I was a little surprised. Who could it be? The whole theater had seemed deserted. Still, I finished what I was doing, not thinking too much of it, until the person entered the stall next to mine. These stalls were the kind that are open at the bottom, so you can see if someone's really inside. That's when I got my second shock. A leg was sticking out from the neighboring stall, positioned like the person was standing facing the wall between us. His legs were filthy. He had no shoes on. His toenails were long and yellowed. Horrified, I barked out, "What the hell are you doing?" No answer. I tried to finish up as fast as I could. The whole situation was creeping me out. That's when I heard a man's voice, familiar somehow, though I couldn't place it. He just said, "Finally. It's over." And that's when panic completely took over. I zipped up and stormed out of the stall, ready to punch whoever was out there. But to my shock, the stall next to mine was empty. Completely empty. There wasn't a soul in the restroom besides me. That freaked me out even more. I washed my hands quickly, splashed cold water on my face, hoping to pull myself together. Everything looked normal. I hurried to get back to my girlfriend. But then came the next surprise. I couldn't get out of the restroom. I opened the door and walked out, only to find myself in another restroom. Identical. Same urinals, same stalls, same sinks. I froze, confused. Maybe I just walked through 2 doors without realizing it. I went through another. Same thing. Again. Identical bathroom. Something's wrong, I thought. I turned back, and tried to go out a different way. Same again. A restroom. I passed through 3 or 4 doors. No change. That's when real panic set in. What now? I muttered. I pulled out my phone. They'll think I'm crazy, but I'll call for help. No signal. No bars. Nothing. Total panic. I started running. I didn't even know where to, I just ran. Slamming doors open left and right. But every time, the same. Just another bathroom. I don't know how far I went or how many restrooms I passed through. I just kept walking. Walking and walking, until my legs gave out. I had no idea how long I'd been in there. There were no windows. No clocks. And my phone, still frozen at 9:45 p.m. The same time, every time I checked. It felt like forever. The rooms were all the same. Each one opening into the next, leading nowhere. Eventually, exhausted, I collapsed. I opened another door, and saw yet another familiar restroom. No matter how disgusting the floor was, lying down on it felt weirdly comforting. I fell asleep right there, sprawled across the tiles. I don't know how much time passed before I woke up. My phone had finally died, so I couldn't even see the usual 9:45 anymore. But my cracked lips and gnawing hunger told me one thing for sure: I'd been trapped in this nightmare for a while. And as hopeless as it felt to wake up still in that bathroom, I knew I couldn't just stay there. I had to get out, somehow, even if the door wouldn't let me. My first plan was to find water. That didn't take long to figure out, given I was in a bathroom with at least 6 sinks. And sure enough, water flowed. Ice cold, fresh water. Even warm if I turned the handle the right way. That felt like half a victory already. From all the survival documentaries I'd obsessively watched, I knew a person couldn't live more than 3 days without water. Now I could only hope I wouldn't be stuck here long enough to have to start worrying about food. Since I now had a water source, I figured I should search the room properly. Maybe I'd find something useful. I checked all the sinks and the pipes underneath. I even managed to disassemble one. Water still poured out of it, but there was nothing of interest. Not even a speck of dust. So I figured I'd check each stall one by one, just in case. But again, nothing. Every toilet was spotless. A couple rolls of toilet paper, that's all. Until I got to the last stall. There, on the wall beside the toilet, I spotted a vent. It wasn't big, just wide enough for maybe my arm to fit through. But it had a grate, screwed in at 4 corners. I started looking for something to remove it with. That's when I remembered my keychain. My girlfriend had once given me a tiny Swiss Army knife that could attach to it. It had a screwdriver head. It sort of fit the screws. Good enough. I got to work. When I finally pried the grate off, I actually shouted with joy. Maybe this is the way out. The vent was completely dark and narrow. I pressed my ear to it and heard faint noises, like something skittering inside. Still, I had no better ideas, so I started yelling into the vent. Help! Somebody help me, I'm trapped in the bathroom. I called my girlfriend's name, just in case she was somehow nearby. Nothing. No police kicking in the door. No girlfriend's voice calling back. I hesitated. Then thought, what if I just reach in? Maybe there's something in there, anything, just something to push this nightmare forward. So I rolled up my sleeve and shoved my arm into the dark opening. No hesitation. I pushed as far as I could go, huge mistake. There was something inside. Small. Hard. Moving. They wriggled across my skin, tickling it. I screamed. Yeah. A grown man, shrieking like a little kid. I yanked my arm back as fast as I could. That's when I saw them. Cockroaches. Crawling up and down my arm. Small. Brown. Sluggish. Dozens of them. I screamed again, more out of rage this time, swiping them off as fast as I could. I've never been afraid of bugs, not really. But this time, this was too much. I stumbled out of the stall, furious. I don't think I've ever cursed that much in my life. I yelled for minutes straight. Just shouting how much I hated this place and how badly I wanted to get out. But no one heard me. The restroom looked the same as always, except now it was slightly torn apart. I'd had enough. I needed to get out. I was sick of this place, the white tiles, the pristine stall doors, and especially the stupid mirrors above the sinks where I had to look at myself. In a rage, I ran to the door and threw it open as hard as I could. But of course, nothing changed. Just another identical bathroom. I screamed at the top of my lungs, like a man losing his mind. I sat there on the bathroom floor, staring blankly ahead. To my right, I propped open the exit door with a trash can, and saw that behind it was just another bathroom. I did the same thing to the door on my left. Same view. Identical restrooms stretching in both directions. Not a single difference. I considered bracing open more doors in each direction, but honestly, I didn't have the energy anymore. And now I had a new problem anyway: hunger. Deep, clawing, maddening hunger. I had no idea how long I'd been there. At some point, I'd fallen asleep again. I had realized that if I lay completely still on the floor, the motion sensor lights would switch off. So I could sleep normally. The dark even helped me trick myself into feeling like I wasn't really stuck in a bathroom at all. But this time, waking up, the hunger hit hard. I felt weak. Powerless. My thoughts came sluggish and broken. I couldn't even think straight, didn't want to. What was the point? That's when I heard the scuttling sounds. They were familiar. I'd heard them before. That's because it was the cockroaches. But this time, they weren't coming from the vent, they were spilling out of the pipes I'd previously dismantled beneath one of the sinks. Falling out, as if someone were tossing them through the pipe at me. They crawled lazily across the floor, clearly unbothered by my presence. Just another part of the scenery. That's when all those survival shows I used to watch came flooding back. My brain flipped a switch: no. You're not dying of starvation in here. Suddenly I knew what I had to do. Everything clicked into place. I grabbed the two small metal trash cans I'd been using to wedge the doors open. I turned on one of the taps, the hottest water I could get, and placed a can underneath, filling it to the brim. It didn't boil, but it steamed, and it felt hot enough. I placed the other can beneath the broken pipe, and the cockroaches immediately began falling in. They didn't even try to escape. It was like they were waiting for it. My next brilliant idea: gut them. I mean, you don't eat just any part of an animal, right? Probably the same goes for bugs. So I pulled out my tiny Swiss Army knife, once again proving to be incredibly useful, and started butchering them. One by one. I sliced off anything that didn't look edible, anything too hard, anything that seemed like armor or shell. What was left were soft, pale, fleshy little chunks. Looked like, I don't know, chicken. I told myself it might taste like chicken too. I forced myself not to think about the guts running down my hand, or the rotting smell they gave off. I just dropped the little edible bits into the hot water, one by one, hoping the bath might at least make them feel cleaner. Easier to swallow. Soon, 40 or 50 bits of cockroach meat floated in the steaming can, and I'll admit something: I was proud of myself. I felt like a proper survivor. Not lost in the Amazon rainforest, no. Just lost in an endless public restroom. But now came the hard part. Actually eating them. I grimaced. I stalled. But my stomach twisted with hunger again, and I had no choice. Surprisingly, it wasn't that bad. Worse than I expected in some places, bitter, mostly where I hadn't cleaned them well enough. I spit those parts out. But the rest? I got it down. I couldn't believe I was sitting on a bathroom floor, eating half-cooked cockroach meat like soup. But I felt full. Kind of. Enough to think clearly again. Back to the real goal: getting out of here. Maybe I'd missed something. A clue. A crack. Something. So I kept going. One bathroom after another. Trying to spot even the tiniest difference. I don't know how long that lasted. At some point, I fell asleep again, just from exhaustion. But I did learn some things. Every room is the same. Every sink, every stall, every mirror. Exactly the same. Except, they're not in a loop. I'm not walking in circles. These rooms open into each other. Forward. Not backward. I tested it. I marked a stall. Walked through a few more bathrooms. Came back. The mark was still there. So I am moving. Just, not toward anything I understand. Also, water's always available. Cockroaches too. So, like it or not, I've got food and water covered. As far as survival goes, I'm fine. Well, sort of. I mean, raw cockroach meat isn't exactly good for digestion. But it was either that or starve. After waking from what I think was my second nap, I made a decision. Judging by my stubble, I'd been in here 4 or 5 days already, and I still hadn't found an exit. That's when I decided to go as far as I physically could. I don't even know how the idea hit me. But I'd counted, there were 4 toilet stalls and 5 urinals per room. I multiplied them. 20. So from then on, I'd move forward 20 bathrooms at a time. After each 20, I'd stop, make dinner, if you can call it that, drink, rest, and check if anything had changed. And that's what I did. Marching forward, clinging to some absurd little math-based system. Hoping it might lead me out of this place. I found nothing. No change. No clue. No exit. I didn't even know how long I'd been walking this pattern, moving through these bathrooms in sets of 20. My beard had grown out. I tried trimming it with my tiny pocket knife, with mixed results. My hair too. I cut it as best I could. My body had withered. I was thin, gaunt. I'd lived off cockroaches for I didn't know how long. My clothes were ragged and filthy, even though I washed myself every 20th room using the lukewarm tap water and the refilling soap dispensers. I even cleaned my clothes sometimes. As much as I could, at least. But it was wearing me down. The endless repetition. The same white tiles, the same stalls, the same damn mirrors showing me a ruined man. A wreck. A ghost of what I used to be. I reached my 20th bathroom again, who knows the number anymore, and collapsed on the floor. Every emotion I'd bottled up hit me at once, sorrow, rage, hopelessness. I sat there, broken, sobbing. Then the fury came. I stood up. As best I could. And I went berserk. I tore at the stall doors, ripped the toilet paper from the holders, kicked and punched the sinks, smashed everything in sight. I picked up a trash can and shattered the mirrors. I didn't want to see myself anymore. I yanked a pipe loose again and used it like a club. I shattered the tiles. I cracked a toilet into pieces. Water spilled from every surface I'd broken. The stalls were hanging half off their hinges. I sat there, panting. Dripping. A shattered man in a shattered room. Then I heard something. A sound. Not the rustle of cockroaches. No, this was different. Louder. Something bigger. I followed it. It came from the shattered toilet. From the pipe. Scratching. Clawing. I grabbed the pipe and smashed the porcelain even more until I found the sewage drain. The sound was louder now. But when I looked in, nothing. No point in being cautious anymore. I reached in. And something bit me. A flash of pain. I yanked my hand out, and a medium-sized rat was dangling from my finger, gnawing furiously. I screamed and flung it against the wall. Its skull burst like rotten fruit against the tiles. I stood there, hand bleeding, blood mixing with the leaking water and the rat's smashed body. What happened after that? I won't describe. Even if I wanted to, I don't think I could. My mind broke in ways I don't want anyone else to ever understand. Sometimes I was aware of myself, sometimes it felt like someone else was in control. I stopped washing. Stopped trimming anything. Started eating rats. Stopped cleaning the cockroaches. My bitten finger got infected. Badly. So, half-conscious, I bit down and sawed it off with my knife. I wrapped the stump in toilet paper. kept it as clean as I could. But I didn't know how long I'd been here. Months? Years? I looked like a homeless man, maybe worse. But I didn't care. I didn't know what I was doing anymore. And then, something different happened. I walked into a new bathroom. And one of the stalls was locked. I froze. Stared at it. Was this real? A hallucination? Wearing my filthy clothes, barefoot, I stumbled toward it. But I didn't touch it. Didn't say anything. Instead, I entered the stall next to it. I stood between the locked stall and mine, then rested my forehead against the wall. And then I heard it. A voice. Familiar. A man's voice. Angry, confused, but unmistakably familiar. And I smiled. Because I knew this moment. I had been here before. I had lived this already. And in a dry, cracked voice, I whispered. Finally, it's over. Story 6. I saw a creepy painting for sale online. Did not order it, but it arrived on my doorstep and now I can't get rid of it. I did not order the painting. Let's get that out of the way right now. I was mildly buzzed, yes, but not so inebriated that I'd mistakenly click, buy now, and order the scariest painting I've ever seen in my life. Like most people, I like to look at stuff I'd never buy online. Last month it was houses I can't afford on Zillow. This month, it's paintings. If I really like one, I might save it to make it my desktop theme. That's the extent of my commitment to supporting art. See, I'm too poor to afford to deck my walls in original artwork, even if I wanted to order a painting. Which I didn't. Especially not this painting. It depicted a figure in an impressionist style, sort of like the famous Munch, the scream crossed with the style of Rembrandt, the figure all cloaked in darkness except for the illumination on the face. The face was the most horrifying part, a fleshy patchwork of light in the otherwise dark canvas. Featureless. Indistinguishable. Like a nightmarish figure out of a dream. I remember staring at my phone for several long minutes, zooming in on that figure. Wondering what it was about the not quite humanness of it that made it so creepy. Even through the phone screen, even with no eyes, I could swear I felt it watching me. I took a screenshot, sent it to some friends asking if it wasn't the creepiest thing they'd ever seen in their lives. That conversation quickly devolved into us sending lots of scary art pictures back and forth, like classic paintings of spooky children, disproportionate babies, a little Bosch, and so on. Fast forward 3 days. There's a package on my doorstep waiting for me when I get home, wrapped in brown paper. I tear open the paper packaging, and it's the painting. That painting. The featureless smear of a face stares at me from the dark canvas. It looks so fleshy I could almost sink my fingers into it. Now, I assumed, of course, that someone ordered the painting for me as a joke. But none of my friends would admit to it. The conversation turned to teasing about me being cursed. To me, this was just further evidence that one or all of them were playing what they thought was the world's most hilarious prank. And honestly, I thought it was kind of funny, too, so I went along. I hung the cursed painting in my living room. And that was that. It should have gone down in the book of my life as a mildly amusing footnote, something to tell guests about whenever they came into my home and asked what the hell was that creepy painting on the wall. But a week after it arrived, I was sitting at my desk working when I swear I heard a quiet rustle. And, you know how you can feel it when someone in your periphery is staring? The sensation was so strong I turned around, and I almost screamed. The painting had eyes, and they were watching me. And I swear to God, swear to you on everything holy, it blinked. Maybe the blink was just my imagining. But it definitely had newly painted eyes there in its fleshy impressionistic blotch of a face. Smears of darkness with just a tiny hint of light reflecting from them. Of course I snapped a photo and sent it to my friends. And of course they all assumed I'd painted on the eyes myself. Even I had to admit, when I got up close, it was clear that new paint had been applied on top of the original. I sent another text to the group, "All right, which of you jokers has been in my house?" Denials all around. Maybe it was a prank, I thought. Most of my close friends know where I keep my spare key. But the painting kept changing. The changes were so subtle I honestly didn't notice at first. Even when I did, I assumed it was whoever had pranked me by buying the painting, that they were adding brushstrokes whenever we had get-togethers. It almost became normal, the way I'd see new additions, just a little at a time. We often joked about it, everyone wondering who the mystery artist was who kept adding details. My friends would later tell me they all honestly thought it was me. But what really started to creep me out was when the changes to the painting made it look like me. One day I woke up and walked out to a creepy impressionistic portrait of myself and decided enough was enough. I took the painting off the wall, dragged it downstairs to the dumpster, and tossed it in. Good riddance. But when I came home from work, it was back on its place on the wall. I was beginning to question my sanity. I tossed it out again. But the next morning when I woke up, it was back on the wall. And its lip was curled. Like it was smiling. I had to go to work, and since I didn't want to run down to the dumpster again, I just turned it around so it was facing the wall, at least that way it couldn't watch me. When I came home from work, I considered trying to throw it away one more time. Or burn it. But I was exhausted after a long day, and since it was still facing the wall, its eyes no longer following me, I left it there and had dinner and spent the evening scrolling through images of exotic plants, my newest fixation. Decided I would deal with the creepy cursed thing in the morning. I did notice, though, as I was getting ready for bed, that it was crooked. I straightened it on the wall and went to bed. In the middle of the night, I was woken by a loud crash. When I rushed out to see what had caused it, I found that the painting had fallen from the wall. Its frame was cracked. Frowning, I nudged it with my toe. Flipped it over. The canvas on the other side was torn, and empty. Completely empty. There was no figure in the painting. And suddenly I had that feeling again, so strong, that feeling of eyes. I backed to the corner of the living room, scanning all corners of my apartment. The sofa. The table. The kitchen area across the open bar. The windows. Where were the eyes watching me from? Where? I was still standing there with my heart hammering like I was about to go into cardiac arrest, looking in disbelief at the broken painting and wondering what was going on when, tum tum tum, this patter of footsteps. And a click. My bedroom door had just closed. Immediately, I called the police to report an intruder. But while I was on the phone with the dispatcher, trying not to sound insane while I described the painting and the figure that was missing from it, suddenly it struck me that this might be one more part of the prank. That one of my friends, the one who might have been making alterations to the painting, could have snuck in to make some final adjustments. And maybe after they accidentally knocked the painting off the wall and caused the crash, they ran into my room to hide from me. Not entirely plausible, but then neither were the fears I was babbling to this 911 operator. She assured me they'd send someone out. I think she assumed I was high as a kite, but also that it was better to be safe than sorry. Or maybe she just thought I needed a wellness check. I'd have thought so, too, after being on that call with me. While waiting for their arrival, in case it was a prank, I steeled myself and went to the bedroom door. Then, just to be on the safe side, I grabbed a kitchen knife. A knife I swore I wouldn't use unless I knew for sure it wasn't one of my friends. And then I went back to the bedroom door, shoved it open, and brandished the knife while yelling. Standing next to my bed was my reflection. No. Not my reflection. But that's what it looked like. It was me. But the hair was messy, like the brush strokes weren't quite finished. And the clothes were not quite right, almost a strange mix of everything I wore all put together. Like the painter couldn't decide on which outfit, so went with them all. But the smile was sharp enough. as were the eyes. And the not me looked at me and raised its hand. In that hand, it held a painted version of my knife. Shit, I gasped. Shit, its lips imitated. I don't know which of us lunged first. Probably the painted me, real me was just standing there in shock. Next thing I knew, I felt the thunk of an impact in my stomach. And then, I don't even know how to describe. The painted knife handle was sticking out of me, and where the blade entered the skin, paint flecked away instead of blood. Instinct kicked in, and I fought like a wildcat, slashing and stabbing, dragging my knife through that other me in a slicing motion, again and again. The other me opened its mouth in a scream, but all I heard was the ragged sound of canvas ripping. It made a final effort to cut through me, but then, my last slice tore it in two. It went limp, only a ragged piece of canvas. I was bleeding from a deep gash in my belly. I believe I lost consciousness. Paramedics later told me they'd found me on the floor, bleeding from a knife wound. Draped over me was a canvas that I'd apparently cut free from the broken frame. They made me get a psych eval. You see, there was no evidence of anyone else in my apartment. The authorities believed that I got angry at the painting, tore it apart, and somehow accidentally stabbed myself in my frenzy. When I finally returned home, the painting, the broken frame and what was left of the canvas, were gone. Not a trace of them. Not a scrap. And I'd been wondering ever since, what would have happened if I hadn't woken up? Was it going to kill me? Or was it going to, somehow, put me in the painting? And perhaps take my place? I'll never know. Because the painting is gone. Gone. From my life, at least. But here's the thing. One of my friends sent me a link recently. Told me they stumbled across it on an art website. The painting is back up on sale. For the love of God, do not buy. Story 7. I'm paid to listen to a feed nobody understands. I took this job because I was broke and out of options. That's how they get you. When you're tired enough, you'll say yes to anything, no questions asked. The ad just said, night monitor, $30 per hour. No experience needed. Must work alone. No phones allowed. No company name, no details, just an address wedged between rusted warehouses near the rail yard. They buzzed me in without a word. No sign on the door, no front desk. A man named Grant handed me a blank ID badge and led me down a hallway that smelled like bleach and stale carpet glue. The room they gave me is the size of a broom closet, one metal chair, a folding table, and a black console about the size of a microwave. No markings. No brand. Just a volume dial, a green light that means the feed is live, and a big red kill switch I'm not supposed to touch unless I hear the knock. That's the only rule. If you hear the knock, you hit the switch. Then write down the time. That's it. They call it environmental monitoring. Nobody says what I'm actually listening to. Some nights it's just static or wind that sounds like it's blowing through a tunnel that never ends. Sometimes I hear dripping water echoing so deep it feels like it's dripping straight through my chest. At first, it was easy. I'd doze in the chair, jerk awake when it squeaked too loud, check the time, go back to fighting sleep. Easy money. About 2 weeks in, I heard it for the first time, for slow knocks, spaced out so perfectly I found myself leaning closer to catch the next one. I stared at the switch but didn't press it. Part of me wanted to see what would happen if I didn't. The knock stopped after the fourth tap, like whoever was knocking decided I wasn't worth it yet. I didn't mention it until Grant caught me smoking out back. He didn't even ask why I didn't hit the switch. He just asked, did it talk? When I shook my head, he said, if it talks, don't answer. If you hear it using your voice, that's the last chance you get. He didn't explain. He just flicked his lighter over and over until his thumb bled. Last night, the knocks came back. 4, then static, then 4 more, closer this time, like they were coming through the floor under my feet. Then I heard my own voice under the hiss, "Help me. Let me out." It didn't sound like a recording. It sounded like me, but wrong, like someone dragging my voice out of a throat that hadn't learned how to shape the words. I ripped the headset off, but I could still hear it, humming through the console, rattling my teeth. The overhead light flickered like the whole room was waiting for me to answer. I didn't hit the switch. I don't know why. I couldn't move. Grant says if it learns your voice, it doesn't need the feed anymore. It'll crawl through any line, any wire. It won't care where you run. I'm supposed to go back tonight. The badge is still on my table. Rent's due next week. If you ever see an ad like that, Night Monitor. No questions. Don't take it. But if you do, promise me this. When you hear the knock, hit the switch. Because once it knows you, it won't stop knocking. Story 8. As long as the door stays closed. I've always had Wallace and Dan in my life. These two are not just my best friends, they're the closest thing to a family I've ever had. I can't remember a time when they weren't a part of my life. It's not a matter of obsessing over one another, they've just always been there for me. I care for them like they were my own foot, or an arm. They just have to be there for things to work, you know. Things weren't going so well for me back in those days. Most of the time I sat at home, isolating myself. I didn't eat much. I slept even worse. I was stuck in a dark place, and I couldn't really force myself out of it. Luckily, I didn't have to. I had people in my life who cared enough to take that step for me, and my buddies were adamant about bringing me back on my feet. Straighten my back, so to speak. Wallace put together a bit of a celebration. First, drinks at his place. Chicken wings, cheese snacks, and poker. Then take an Uber downtown for more drinks and meeting some people. Dan had some friends from work we were gonna hang out with. Good people, like a work family, he said. Not my usual deal, but I could see that I needed to make an effort. So I dug around in my closet until I found something colorful and went to spend a night with the boys. We were originally going to Dan's place, but his sister was in town and needed to crash on his couch. She was welcome to come along, but she wasn't up to it. So at the last minute, we switched to Wallace's place, a row house on a rundown street, but in a good part of town. The kind of street that has a cigarette-infused corner shop just across from a Whole Foods. Wallace and Dan met me out by the curb. "I don't think he's taken his medicine, Wally," said Dan. "I'd have to agree, Dan," said Wally. They always did this thing where they kept repeating each other's names when they wanted to make a point. I could see where this was going a mile away. "Good thing we had a chat with Dr. Heineken," nodded Dan, "we know your dosage." "And if he got it wrong, we got 3 6-packs of second opinions from Nurse Guinness," added Wallace. "Nurses can't write prescriptions," I added. "They can in Canada," grinned Dan, "look it up." "It's true." "This don't look like Ontario to me," I said. "But I get your point." "The man is down bad," huffed Wallace. "He's gonna need all the help he can get." We settled down around the dinner table, had some chicken wings, a couple of beers, and talked for a while. Wallace had a pretty bare-bones place, not much stuff on the walls. A living room, a bedroom, and a small guest room that doubled as emergency storage. It was the kind of bachelor pad that had a slight echo to it if you listened closely. But it had all the essentials, a nice couch, a big TV, and a bed that hadn't had its sheets changed for a solid 2 months. Dan talked a lot about his sister coming to town. How she kept nagging him about pointless things. How he was the one helping her out, and she acted like she was the one taking care of him. "I'm not the one who cheated on my husband and got kicked out," Dan scoffed. I'm not the one who quit my job on a whim to slack on my little brother's couch. You're right, Wallace added. You'd be very faithful to your husband. Bless your heart. Damn straight, Dan nodded. Too bad I'm into women. Shame, I said. I'd marry you. Of course you would. You both would. I'm amazing. Wallace whipped out a deck of cards and put on something from Netflix in the background. Some reality show. Wallace usually liked to have a lot of sounds going on around him. He didn't like it when things got too quiet. He was from a big family, so it didn't take much for him to feel alone. I was on the opposite side of the spectrum, being an only child. Dan was somewhere in the middle. The two of them might sound like idiots, but they were more successful than people give them credit for. Wallace worked with overseas shipping, and Dan was shift manager at a bottling plant. Not the kind of titles that needed years of study to reach, but the kind of positions that require a good head on your shoulders. They were solid people, great under pressure, and honest to a fault. We played a couple of rounds, chit-chatting between games. Wallace was a great bluffer. The only thing you could know for sure is that whatever you thought he had something different. But when you figure that out, he changes to something else. He is the kind of player who always plays the person and not the cards, and he's damn good at it. Dan, on the other hand, is a wild card. He can go all in on the most random nonsense, but he can also quit when he's far ahead. He's a complete fluke, but sometimes, that's what it takes to beat a guy like Wallace. We'd been playing for about an hour when I had to use the bathroom. I hurried away, locked the door, did my business, and reached for a towel to dry my hands. Problem was, Wallace's bathroom was downright nasty. Toothpaste flicks on the bathroom mirror and a funky smell seeping into the guest hand towels. I could tell they'd been there for a while. Most things had this faint yellow tinge. I decided to get a fresh towel. I figured he had a couple hidden away for fancy company, so I dug through a pile of fresh laundry. Nothing peculiar there. I dug around some more. As I did, I heard the guys call out from the other room, telling me where to find more toilet paper if needed. There was a cabinet under the sink. A big one. It didn't have any handles, but I could tell you could open it. There was a magnet on the side. So I slid a finger in there and pulled it open. I think it had some kind of lock, because there was a bit of a forceful click. I think I broke it. Something small spilled out and moved across my arms. Maggots. Fat little white things, contracting and extending in a sickly rhythm. They were all over the inside of the cabinet. At first, it looked like Wallace had crammed a big black trash bag in there, but looking a little closer, the details got clearer. It was a corpse. The body was wrapped in a black shirt and dark jeans. No shoes, or socks. It had decayed into a desaturated grayish-green, almost mummified. Thin brown hair stretching down a wrinkled forehead. Wide-open mouth and hollowed-out eyes. Bone-yellowed teeth like bars to an insect prison. That's where the smell came from. It wasn't just an unwashed bathroom, there was a dead body. A real, actual, deceased human body. You okay in there? Wallace called out. You need something? I'm good. My voice was cracking. My arms shook as my heartbeat engulfed every other sound. I tried brushing off the maggots that had crawled up on me, but I kept finding more and more. I had to think fast. I brought out my phone and dropped it on the floor, squashing another maggot. I picked the phone back up and snapped a couple of pictures of the body. Then I grabbed a handful of toilet paper, cleaned up the maggots that had gotten out, and flushed them. I put everything back the way it was, but the door kept swinging open a little. I washed my hands again and stood by the mirror for a moment. I honestly thought I was having a nightmare. I couldn't fathom this being something real. A dead body in Wallace's bathroom. No wonder he didn't want us to be here for the pre-party. No wonder he was asking what was taking me so long. If he thought I knew, what would he do? I wiped my hands on the nasty hand towels and went back outside. The air felt warmer, but I think it was just me. Dan had brought out a cheese plate and some crackers. My eyes got stuck on the sharp cheese knife that was waiting on the far side of the table. As I sat down, Dan handed it to me, away from Wallace. "You gotta try this cheddar," he said. "You know I don't care for Wisconsin, but this thing might just change my mind." "Yeah, I'll try it," I muttered. "A little piece." "My honorable dude, I'm giving you 3. You're gonna want 3. All right." Wallace had this ambient smile, and he noticed me staring. His face didn't move a muscle. I'm sure he could see something in me had changed, but he didn't buckle. He just let my eyes stick to his. "It's good cheese," Wallace smiled. "I think you'll like it." "Gotta pace myself," I said. "Stomach's not what it used to be." "Yeah, you were in there a long time," he continued. "Real long time." We played a couple more rounds, passing the cheese plate around. Whenever Wallace picked it up, he did this little flick of the wrist that gave the blade a whooshing noise. Like, he held it upside down, and then flicked it up with a swoosh. It kept breaking my concentration, and I lost 3 hands in a row. It wasn't even close. I didn't have the slightest idea what to do. I had pictures on my phone. I could excuse myself and call the police, but could I leave Dan alone with him? Should I bring him along? But wouldn't Wallace figure out that I knew if I suddenly got up and left? There was also the possibility that I was wrong somehow. That Wallace hadn't done anything, that this was something else. The body looked really old. If it had been fresh, the whole building would have smelled like death. The body must have been dead for months. But that didn't matter. Wallace had lived here for years. Dan took a short break to use the bathroom, leaving me alone with Wallace. The reality show lingered in the background, covering the room in Valley Girl banter. Wallace kept his eyes on me as I held the cheese plate near. More importantly, I kept the knife close. "I thought you didn't want to rush your stomach," he said. "You're hogging the cheese there." I guess Dan was right, I nodded. "It's good. Mind handing me that knife?" he asked. "I want to cut a few slices." "How many you want?" I asked. "I want to do it myself," he said. "No offense, but you cut them too thick." "It's fine, I got you," I insisted. "How many you want?" A frown formed on Wallace's face. Subtle, but it was there. Not suspicion, but something else. Frustration. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe I was getting away with it. The discussion burst like a bubble as Dan came back with a vengeance. Salt. Lemon. Tequila shots. All the while, I could tell Wallace had noticed me keeping a close eye on the cheese knife. The reality show got stuck on a "Are you still watching?" verification check, underlining just how quiet things had gotten. Just the sound of cards being shuffled and flipped, the occasional clink of a glass. Dan offered me another shot, but I turned it down. My head was already swimming. "You want something fancier?" he asked. "It's a special night, now's a good time to ask." "Nah, really, I'm good," I said. A thought crossed my mind, and I held up a finger. I pointed to Wallace as casually as my body allowed. "By the way," I continued, "don't you have that other card game in your car? The one with the white cards and the nasty jokes?" "In my car?" Wallace asked. "You sure?" "Yeah, I think you brought it along last time we went out." "Funny," Wallace said. "That's funny." "No, really," I insisted. "I'm pretty sure you had it." Wallace didn't quite catch what I was going for. Dan, on the other hand, got up from his chair and pointed at the bedroom. "He means Cards Against Humanity, Wally. I think you got it in your bedroom." Dan wandered off before I could protest. I'd wanted to get Wallace separated so I could show Dan what was in the bathroom. Now I was stuck with Wallace again. He gave me a curious look. "You good?" he asked. "You don't seem all there, you know." I didn't know what to say, and by the time I'd figured out a good enough lie, too much time had passed. He could tell I wasn't being genuine. Despite all the drinks I'd had, my tongue was dry as sand. I gave him a shrug and sipped my lukewarm Heineken. "I don't know," I said. It's been crazy." "You're telling me," he chuckled. "Man, I get it. It's like, when it rains, it pours, you know. One day, and it's all upside down, inside out." "Yeah," I nodded. "Sometimes it all just happens." The image of the dead body flashed in my mind. The strangest details stuck with me, like how long the teeth looked behind the retracted gums. Were all teeth that long? It made me hyper-aware of my mouth, making me smack my lips. "Change takes time," Wallace nodded. "We're here if you need it." And with that, he leaned across the table. I thought he was gonna pat me on the hand, but instead, he snatched the cheese plate and the knife. He grinned as he cut up a piece of cheddar, giving me a wry smile. "No hogging the cheese," he grinned. "Not cool." Dan came back empty-handed. He'd found some other board games, but he figured we shouldn't start Monopoly this late. Besides, it didn't go well with tequila. We turned back to poker. Wallace put on another episode of that show. We discussed the details of where we were going and who we were going to meet. Wallace kept talking about this guy from work that couldn't be there, to the point where it made me take note. It was strange for Wallace to bring it up out of the blue. No one had asked. Was he inadvertently telling us who the corpse was? "I don't have a lot of friends at work," Wallace admitted. "I think y'all would like Chris. He's a nice guy." "He can be the nicest guy in the world, but we're going out for the dames," Dan said, matter-of-factly. "That's just the way it is." "Why couldn't Chris come?" I asked. "He busy." "Not sure," Wallace said with a shrug. "Preoccupied." During our next couple of rounds, I had another tactic. I made sure our glasses were topped off. Both me and Dan had already used the bathroom, so I figured I could get Wallace to go next. That'd give me some time alone with Dan. I made sure everyone drank, and like clockwork, Wallace excused himself for the restroom. As soon as he locked the door, I fumbled my phone out of my pocket. Dan didn't notice anything at first, but as soon as he saw my demeanor shift, a worry settled over him. I unlocked my phone and put a finger to my lips. "Look," I whispered. "We got a call for help. There's a dead body in there." "What?" It's like he didn't register the words. I might as well have spoken a foreign language. It went in one ear and out another. "A dead body," I repeated. "Look, I saved it." I showed him the pictures I took. He scrolled back and forth and scoffed a little. He was laughing, as if I was telling a joke. I realized the light in the pictures wasn't the best, and it didn't help that I was holding the phone from a weird angle. It probably just looked like a garbage bag covered in white sprinkles. "It's not a joke," I assured him. "It's really there. Right under the sink, stuffed in like a dash. The toilet flushed." I put the phone back in my pocket and looked back up at Dan. His smile had faded a little, but I could see he wasn't understanding. Perhaps, in his world, what I was saying was impossible. So before Wallace got back, I leaned back and whispered. "See for yourself. Go back in. Check under the sink." Wallace came back and sat back down. Dan gave me another look and headed to the bathroom without a word. For the third time, I was alone with Wallace. This time, he could tell I was upset. I couldn't hide it. Not after talking to Dan like that. "You're really not looking well," said Wallace. "Maybe we shouldn't go out." "Maybe," I nodded. "We'll just see how this plays out." "What do you mean?" he asked. "How what's gonna play out?" Wallace leaned over the poker table, keeping the cheese knife close to his body. I listened for Dan to react to the body in the bathroom, but there was nothing. Maybe he was already calling for help while I kept Wallace busy. You know, whatever, I said. Whatever happens, happens. Whatever happens, happens. Wallace lawed. Mister, I need to know where all bathrooms are at all times. Wanna tell me that whatever happens, happens. Now I know you're not all right. Well, maybe I'm not, I said, throwing up my arms. Maybe I'm not okay. Is something bothering you? He pressed on. Is it something I did? I think it might be, I nodded. Might be something you did. I've never been the kind of person to confront people out of the blue. Especially not people I care about. But I'd had a couple of drinks, and I wasn't feeling like myself anymore. Hell, nothing felt real anymore. It's like I'd fallen into some kind of bizarro world where one of my best friends had turned into a cold-blooded murderer. But there was no mistaking what I'd seen. Dan got out of the bathroom, and in the split second where Wallace looked up, I snatched the cheese knife from the plate, leaving the cheddar. There was the harsh noise of metal scraping against ceramic as I jumped out of my chair, holding the knife as a weapon. Wallace got up from his chair and stepped away from the table. Dan backed away with a quiet, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." I pointed at Dan with my free hand. Dan. Call the police, I said. Call them right now. What are you doing? Wallace yelled. Put the damn knife down. So you can take it. I snapped back. You want to put yours under the sink too? Wallace shook his head, as if trying to rattle the confusion out of his mind. He took a deep breath and looked me in the eye. What, exactly, is the problem here? He asked. The problem is you got a goddamn body stuffed under the sink. Wallace cocked his head. And with a shrug, he said. So. Out of all the things he could have said, that's the one that surprised me the most. I thought he was going to defend himself, or straight up deny it. But no, he didn't seem to mind this at all. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I didn't know what to feel. Dan saw it too, I said. I took photos. I showed him. Yeah, said Dan, yeah, I saw it. I turned to him. Dan was lined up against the wall, holding his hands like he was at gunpoint. Dan shot Wallace with an accusatory look. I can't believe you stuffed the damn thing under the sink, he said, shaking his head. That's lazy, even for you. My feet felt light, and my head heavy. It's like there were so many thoughts pushing into my head that I had trouble keeping my neck straight. Like I was being crushed from the top down. A darkness sunk straight through my heart and settled in my stomach, burning with gastric acid all the way down. It's temporary, said Wallace. Bad timing, haven't had time to move it. You need my truck, Wally? Dan asked. It's a bitch to clean, you know. Should be good, Wallace shrugged. It's just ash and bone, won't leave a trace. They were talking like I wasn't there. Like I wasn't holding a knife. Did one of them have some kind of hidden weapon? How could they not see me as a threat? I unlocked my phone and dialed the emergency services but left my hand off the call button. That got their attention. Whoa, 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 said Dan, you serious? What do you think you're doing? I'm not letting you turn murder into a fucking joke, that's what I'm doing. Holy shit, he's blanking, said Wallace. Oh, fuck, you're right, said Dan, he is blanking. I held the phone up with my finger on the call button. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't make sense of what they were saying. I didn't know what to do, and I was just as ready to start swinging that knife around as I was calling for help. My nerves were a coin toss from fight, flight, or come what may. You're not making any sense, I wheezed. None of you. Wallace held up an open hand. Look, I'm sorry, he said. We didn't realize what was going on. This gotta be traumatic. Just put the phone down, said Dan, you can keep the knife. I shook my head. I did nothing. No calling, no cutting, no yelling or screaming. I just observed them and waited for a solution to reveal itself. Wallace stepped out from behind the poker table. The reality show was still rolling in the background. Two girls with wide accents arguing loudly over a birthday cake. "We're celebrating," said Wallace, slowly. "You remember that part, right?" "Yeah," I said. "We're going out. Guys' night out, yeah," he continued. "Do you know why?" "I've been having a hard time," I said. "You wanted to take me out." "That's not a celebration," Dan added. "That's just being good people. This is a celebration." "Do you remember what we're celebrating?" Wallace asked. "Do you know that part?" I didn't. Thinking back on it, there was a bit of a muddled cloud over that part. It had come pretty much from nowhere. The guys had invited me out, and I accepted without a second thought. Like we'd done it before, but I couldn't remember when, or why. "Sometimes when you do things you wouldn't do, we blank out," Wallace added. "Happens to a lot of newbies." "What the fuck kind of sentence is that?" I let out a joyless laugh. The knife in my hand shook, and long after the laugh was gone, the shaking remained. "You're not you," said Dan from the sidelines. "None of us are. We're, you know. We're different," Wallace nodded. "Better." Wallace pointed to the bathroom, taking a step closer. "That's me in there," he said. "The real me. But I'm real too." Wallace took another step forward and extended a hand. "Give me something," he said. "The phone, or the knife. Or both. But you gotta trust me." "I don't even understand what you're saying," I said. "How the hell am I supposed to trust you?" "Because you know me. You know Dan. You've known us long, long before we got here. We're the same brood, man. Brothers." "Brood," Dan scoffed, shaking his head. "Don't like that word. Dan." "Not the time," Wallace said, rolling his eyes. Dan held up a hand apologetically and shuffled away from the wall. Wallace was right in front of me. He slowly placed a hand on the blade of my knife. The Valley girls on the TV were laughing now. Drama solved. The cake was safe. "I can tell you we helped you," said Wallace. "I can tell you that you're the youngest. But no matter the words, you can still feel it. You know you can trust us." But I didn't know shit. I had a murderer wrapping his hands around my weapon, and I was hesitating. I couldn't stop that image. That black shirt. Those dark jeans. The plop of a fat maggot hitting the ceramic tiles. "You want me to show you?" Wallace asked. "You want the truth?" I didn't. I really didn't. I just wanted to go home and forget that entire night. To go back to the time where we were just gonna go out for drinks. Guys' night. And yet, I released the knife and nodded. Wallace dropped it on the floor. "Yeah," I sobbed. "I want the truth." We went out the back door. Dan was in no position to drive, but I saw him lean over a fence and do this strange hulking movement. After a couple seconds, his stomach rippled, and a transparent blob of jelly rolled out of him like a hairball. Then he was fine. Sober, even. No slurred speech. No swinging movement. He went and got his pickup truck. Wallace cleaned up the maggots and wrapped the cabinet in plastic. Once Dan got back, the two of them carried it to the truck and secured it with bright plastic straps. All three of us had to pile in the front seat, sitting side by side. Any other night of my life, I wouldn't have given it a second thought. Now it felt like surrender. They played music and talked. Dan had to call his work friends and tell them we weren't coming to the club. Wallace seemed a bit peeved about it, but there was too much to do. At least, that's what it sounded like. Dan's position at the bottling plant allowed him access to a warehouse. And with that, he could get to some shipping containers. We rolled past a gate with an armed guard. Dan seemed to know him, they waved at each other. Apparently, it wasn't that unusual for Dan to drop by unannounced late at night on the weekend. We parked. Wallace and Dan got the cabinet. As they did, they gave me a tired look. "You might as well help," said Wallace. "You gonna have us carry this on our own?" I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know if I was still gonna call for help or not. It felt like a part of my conscience had taken a physical beating, like the decision-making part of my brain was swollen. The two of them just stood there, waiting for me to lend a hand. They weren't gonna move until I did. So I helped them. I could feel something frail and dry rolling around in the cabinet as we moved, like bags of old cigars. 3 guys, and an improvised coffin. Our footsteps echoed against the metal walls. Hollow containers in neutral colors, most of which were rusted or scheduled for destruction. We went to the far end of the building and put down the cabinet. We all took a moment to catch our breaths. The container in front of us was just like all the others. The same neutral color. Similar serial numbers. Same company logo, a faded blue sunflower print. Dan stepped up and clicked the lock open. Then he gave me some space, and Wallace tapped me on the shoulder. "When you're ready." The container was slightly ajar. Dan was using a little flashlight from his keychain, casting my shadow across the door. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. I could walk away and never know for sure. Or I could fling those doors wide open. There might be nothing inside, and I'd have 2 of my friends murder me. Or there would be something inside that I would be unable to understand. But as long as I was out there, with my hand on the door, I could be anything. A guy being pranked. A victim. A murderer. As long as that door stayed close, I was all of it at once. But I had to know which one was real. The doors swung open with a rusty whine. There was a lot of plastic, and a lot of chemicals. Vacuum-sealed bags. A hand on my shoulder urged me forward. Another hand reached ahead, pointing at one of the corners. "There," Dan said. "That's you." And with that, I broke into 1,000 screaming pieces. I hadn't just been in a dark place these last few weeks. It had been a real, actual space. Somewhere dark and fractured. Somewhere you are born and dying in the same heartbeat, dreaming of life. And somewhere in there, I dreamt of me. A life not my own, but someone else's. But I dreamt it so clearly, so vividly, that I wanted it as my own. I remember barking. A hunched skulking behind the trash cans. How I'd practiced standing, and talking, and walking. Changing. Dan and Wallace had helped me. I knew them from before. There was a body in that container that looked like me. It had succumbed to my dream, and it had been replaced. And I'd wanted so bad for that dream to be real that I'd forgotten. I'd blanked. There was a body, and that body was me. Those were my eyes, unblinking as another fly drank itself fat off my cold skin. "You'll get there, buddy," Dan muttered. "Take your time." My mind cycled. I was real, but I wasn't real. I had thoughts, but they weren't mine. I'd done all I could to get away from that dark, but it was still there. The more I thought about it, the more I felt it. I stood there on my knees, looking at my broken face lit up by a faint pocket light. My eyes looking back at me from behind a sheet of plastic. But those were never my eyes. In so many ways, we were alike, but we weren't the same. Wallace and Dan took me home later that night. They closed the container and locked it back up. We weren't gonna use it anymore, and there were no more bodies to hide. The gang was all here, and this ordeal was going to disappear forever. From that night on, there would be nothing and no one that could say I wasn't me. They could run every test on my body, ask me any question, and check every atom of my being. I am me. But in every other way, I am not. It's such an alien thought to live with. This one thing is such a small part of my life, but it changes everything. I know I'm no different from what I dreamed I'd be, but that doesn't change the fact that it never happened to me. I wasn't the one who graduated high school, or got my driver's license. That was another body. One that I dreamed of. And yet, I know all about it. I could point my math teacher out in a crowd, even though I'd never really seen the man with these eyes. I'm just a copy. But Dan and Wallace was different. Not only were they my real friends, they were also something more. Something other. And even on that level, we are family. I know there are others, but they're not like us. They're not brood. They want more than to step out of the dark. It's been some time since poker night. The guys originally took me out to celebrate my arrival, or crossing the line. I was the last addition to the group, and we'd finished the replacement just a couple of days prior. I'd gone so far into my new life that I completely blanked on what we'd done. I still can't see it clearly. It's like smoke in a nightmare. We still play poker sometimes. Not to celebrate, but just for fun. I still go to work, and laugh, and joke. I can enjoy a cold beer and watch my favorite show. But there's always that nagging voice in the back of my mind. Am I really enjoying this, or am I convincing myself that I like this? Am I laughing because that's what I dreamt I should, or because I find something funny? Where does what's real end, and I begin? I don't know why I'm posting this. It's just throwing a message in a bottle into the void of the internet, I suppose. Hell, I haven't even used our real names. Maybe I'm just lying about all of it. Maybe it's just as much make-believe as my whole existence. I suppose if there's something I want you to take with you, it is that looks can deceive. Anything can be taken for granted, and anything can be a lie. The greatest perceptible truth of a human life can turn out to be nothing. So maybe we should just enjoy what we have, for as long as we can allow ourselves to have it. Even if it's just poker night with the guys. I guess, as the song goes, life is but a dream. Story 9. I went to a no-phone retreat and woke up with stitches. They called it a luxury detox. No phones, no clocks, no screens of any kind. Just a week to reconnect with your inner stillness, they said. The retreat was tucked away in the high desert, surrounded by red rock and silence. Private casitas. Organic meals. Cold plunges. Daily yoga under the sky. It sounded exactly like what I needed. They took my phone at the front gate. Smiled. Told me this was my first step toward freedom. I signed the waiver. Posed for a welcome photo. They gave me soft linen clothes in muted earth tones and led me to my casita. No mirrors. No caffeine. No time. Everything was beige. Everything whispered. At first, I liked it. The food was clean. The air was sharp and herbal. I slept better than I had in months. The guides were all young and calm and eerily beautiful. They said things like, "You're not lost. You're remembering, and let go of time. You're here now." The other guests seemed normal at first, quiet, exhausted-looking professionals, probably overworked and overstimulated like me. But after 2 days, no one made eye contact anymore. Conversations stopped. Meals were silent. Yoga was silent. Even the birds seemed to go quiet. I asked a guide how long we'd been there. She didn't answer, just smiled and pressed her hand to my chest. Feel this. That's all that matters now. That night, I woke up to someone standing at the foot of my bed. They didn't move. They didn't speak. By the time I sat up, they were gone. My door was still locked from the inside. I told myself it was a dream. That my brain was just misfiring from all the silence and strange food. The next morning, we began grounding ceremonies. Long periods of humming. Chanting in slow, deep rhythms. It made the floor vibrate under my feet. I felt dizzy. Unmoored. I leaned toward the woman next to me and whispered, "Doesn't this feel weird?" She didn't respond. She didn't even blink. That night, she was gone. A guide announced that she had been energetically discharged. I asked if I could leave too. The guide smiled, almost sympathetically. "You're not ready to return. The discomfort is part of the release." That night, my door wouldn't open. From the inside. I banged on it until my hands hurt. No one came. In the morning, a different guide brought me a small ceramic cup of tea and placed it gently by my bed. "You've been shifted to a higher integration track," she whispered. I didn't drink the tea. I started pretending. Pretending to chant. Pretending to sleep. I kept my eyes open just enough to see shadows moving through my room at night. They come in when you're unconscious. Sometimes alone. Sometimes in pairs. They touch things. Adjust your bedding. Place something cold on your forehead. Once, I swear I heard whispering. Soft, rhythmic phrases like someone praying under their breath. I had enough. I left the next morning. Or rather, they let me leave. No fanfare, no ceremony, just a silent, stone-faced escort to the front gate where my phone was returned to me, fully charged and powered off. The woman who handed it over, the same one who brought me the tea, smiled faintly as I took it from her. And before turning away, she said, "You'll feel the benefits more clearly once your body adjusts." I thought she meant the diet. It wasn't until hours later, somewhere on the drive home, that I reached up to scratch my neck and winced. I pulled over at a gas station bathroom and checked the mirror. There was a bandage behind my ear. Fresh. Taped down neatly. I peeled it back with shaking hands. 6 stitches. Tidy. Pink. Still healing. And for the first time since I arrived at that place, I remembered something else that one of the guides said to us during a closing breathwork circle before we were dismissed. "We're so honored to hold space for your transformation, even if you don't remember what you've left behind." I didn't understand what that meant then. Now, I'm terrified to find out.